Jon Machota of The Athletic, not just a Cowboys insider, John, these days, but your resident tattoo expert. Is that right?
What?
That is, yeah. I mean, if guys are going to be doing full leg and arm sleeves, and it's all the star players of the Cowboys, I guess I'll report on that.
Yeah, all right, let me ask you in that vein. Have you learned anything that you did not realize before you had to have a mini tattoo beat over the last few months?
I would say the biggest thing for me is I didn't realize that the whole having four people work on you at the same time. And the only reason why I say this is because I'm the type of person that I can't even do a simple basic drawing of a person, on a piece of paper, let alone to do some type of thing on, working on someone's leg or arm. And you have to, contour to their skin and things like that. And then to have, three other artists that you're confident in that they can be doing something while you're doing something else so you guys can get this done as soon as possible. The teamwork aspect of it kind of blew my mind, especially when you see the finished product and how seamless the whole, tattoo looks is just wild to me. And then also, obviously, I wanted to know pricing and things like that. I mean, what is this entailing? So yeah, no, all of it was fascinating to me. And it just, the fact that it starts out with, CeeDee Lamb, they do a good job on him, on his back piece. So then Dak sees it and he likes it. And then Tony Pollard sees that and then he likes it. And then I think Trayvon Diggs is going to get something done. So, talking to the main artist there, Andres Ortega, it is pretty interesting how fast the word of mouth has traveled for him in his business and Instagram, to the point where he just opened a shop in Arizona in Glendale, not too far from the stadium there, and how he hasn't even had a chance to have walk-ins because he has so many, clients already scheduled in advance.
Jon Machota, tattoo insider.
That's
as well,
right.
as well as Cowboys insider.
Hey, John, I'm going to clip that up on email to you. Make sure to take it to your bosses and see if you can get a raise behind it.
I like that. Hey, real quick, I got a question for you guys. Radio business behind the scenes here. Who comes up with the music that you guys to play to go into a segment like right there when you played that Bone Thugs and Harmony?
All right. So first of all, as we played first of the month, I wanted to make sure everybody listening knows it is actually the 6th. And if you were thinking it's the 1st, you are late on your rent or mortgage. But secondly, that's actually kind of a centralized job that this music director kind of puts in a whole bunch of bumps and these things kind of just randomly come up. Unless you're Lucius Alexander, the great on the board, where he just pulls whatever music he's feeling and it makes the vibe so much better.
I like that. I never knew how that went. If it's you guys are picking all of that, or it's just kind of set up and you just go with whatever a producer picks out for you.
Oh no, if we were picking that, trust me, you would never hear Fort Minor ever again. Please believe.
Remember the name, of course. John, as we get closer to the NFL draft, we are exactly 3 weeks away from the NFL's annual selection meeting. Give me a name or two that you feel like we need to start kind of maybe coalescing around, or is there a group of names that you feel like could really be in play there at 26 based on what you've come to learn and observe from this Cowboys team going into the NFL draft?
There's not, if I was just going to give you one name, I think I'd say Jalen Hyatt, but I think it's more so the wide receiver position in general. And the reason why I say that is because I just think there's not a consensus at all with those top, 4 or 5 wide receivers, the ones that you would potentially 1 or 2 could possibly, maybe 3 could be there for you at 26. And so I just look at that position as one where, you go back to 2020 and as the draft's unfolding, I think that was the year the Cowboys had 17. And you're just like, man, I can't believe, Kayvon Chaison's still there, falling to them. It just seemed like a draft that, defensive end, corner, that seems like that's what they need. And then CeeDee Lamb is there, and there wasn't much buzz about CeeDee Lamb to the Cowboys. In fact, there was none going into that draft. But because he was so high on their board and they didn't even think that he'd be there, plans change. And so I say the wide receiver position and a guy like a Jalen Hyatt, because of the fact of, well, one, he's one of their 30 visitors, but also, what if one of those receivers, maybe him, maybe Jordan Addison, maybe it's Jackson Smith and Jigba, what if one of those guys is the top receiver or second best receiver on their board and he's there at 26? Because I don't know that they're going to have their board set up the exact same way that Carolina will or the Eagles will or some other teams, that they might really like one of those wide receivers and might think it's absolute steal at 26. And so, yes, they made the trade for Brandon Cooks, but I certainly think wide receiver is very much in play at 26.
It's funny because I absolutely respect the value play of this, and you do need, obviously you have your starting 3 wide receivers, we all imagine, but you do need a 4th wide receiver, understanding that this is football and dudes get injured or, guys need to play it off. With that being, all considered, Jalen Tolbert was a 2nd-round selection last year. Semi Fehoko 3rd-round selection, thank you. And then also Semi Fehoko has been on this team a few years. How do you think the organization feels about these guys? Because these guys have largely fallen out of the larger discourse outside of the building.
Well, I think that there's hope that Jalen Tolbert having a full year in the organization and an expectation that he'll be better than he was last year. But it's the same thing with Michael Gallup. They thought that he would probably be a little bit more impactful less than a year removed from that knee injury. Now he'll be 2 years. So there's more hope and expectation that Michael Gallup will perform more like he did before the knee injury, and that Jalen Tolbert, being now a 2nd-year wide receiver, can make a little bit more of a jump to where, hey, maybe he should be able to be, like you said, you use a 3rd-round pick on him. The expectation that you should go into this season is he is your 4th wide receiver. But if you have any thought that maybe that isn't the case, or that, hey, we can't be going on hope here. We got to make sure we get some other help here, and one of those top receivers is there for you. I get why you would do that, because it was a league where I really felt like you needed 2 really good starting wide receivers. Then it was 3, and now I think we're at the spot that you need 4. And so if Jalen Tolbert is the player that they thought he was when they drafted him, and it just took him a year to catch up to where they want him to be, then yeah, maybe they don't worry about wide receiver. But I just see all these wide receivers that they're bringing in, and it makes me think, like, even if they don't address it in the 1st round, they're addressing it at some point.
Jon Machota, The Athletic, covering the Dallas Cowboys, joining us here on the Get Right with Reggie KG here on your home with the Cowboys. 105.3 The Fan. Other positions outside of receiver, a lot of talk around tight end, a lot of talk around offensive line as well, possibly even corner. How would you rank the position of either need or want based on the way that the Cowboys have been able to move this offseason with the moves that they've made?
Well, I would say that the 2 biggest needs would be a left guard and defensive tackle. And both positions, you'd sit there and think, well, okay, those are your top 2. Well, they'll address that at 26. And I just don't know that that'll necessarily be the case, because they might not like the players there at 26 of those positions as much as they might like a wide receiver, or like if a Bijan Robinson falls to them, they might not even be thinking of that. But then all of a sudden Bijan falls to them, and they're just like, well, obviously we're doing this. I mean, I know we have bigger holes other places, but this is just, you got to go in this direction. And that's the way you should be drafting at 26. It shouldn't be to just fill a need and say, well, there's 3 players we like more than O'Cyrus Torrence, but O'Cyrus Torrence is here and we need a left guard. Let's go get him. Like, I don't like the idea of it, and I don't get the sense that they're going to draft like that anyway. But yeah, left guard, if you get somebody there 26 or in the 2nd round, that makes a lot of sense. If there's a defensive tackle there that you really like, but I just, when we're talking 26, I got to go off of history. I mean, this is a team that hasn't drafted a defensive tackle in the 1st round since Russell Maryland in 91. So until they do that, I have my doubts about that. And then even at tight end, it's a deep tight end class. Everybody talks about how good this class is, and I have my doubts that they'll draft a tight end in the 1st round. They haven't done that in a long time, not since 97. Mike McCarthy's 13 years in Green Bay. They never drafted a tight end in the first 2 rounds. They've gotten good production out of Jake Ferguson, 4th-round pick, Dalton Schultz, 4th-round pick, Peyton Hendershot, undrafted guy, Sean McEwen, an undrafted guy. It makes me think that they probably look at tight end of like, yeah, is Michael Mayer or Dalton Kincaid the best tight ends? Sure. But maybe they think that there's a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round that they could get that's not that far off in terms of impact to go with that group. That's the only reason those positions are major needs, don't get me wrong, but I don't sense that they're going to reach on a position over value of a prospect that could be there.
With talk of Jalen Carter possibly falling down or out of teams' draft boards completely, could you see this team taking a risk with Carter at 26 if he's there?
Jerry Jones is still the owner and general manager, so absolutely. Everything is on the table with Jerry Jones. There's no, now I will say this. It could be one of those things where we find out after the 1st round's over. Let's say Jalen Carter was there. Obviously you guys have seen the reports that have come out that there's multiple teams that have completely taken him off their board. Maybe after the 1st round, or maybe he's a 2nd or 3rd round pick, and then after that pick, maybe Jerry or Steven will say, yeah, he was the guy we had off of our board, but they're not going to say that beforehand. And the way Jerry Jones loves the whole idea of getting the talent, and he'll worry about the off-the-field stuff later, man, if Jalen Carter starts slipping, there's just no way you can rule out the Cowboys.
Now, we're talking to Jon Machota of The Athletic. I like to call him Johnny Matches. Was there anybody on the 30 visits for these Cowboys that caught your attention for whatever reason?
It's a good question. You know what? I'll probably say Zay Flowers just because of the size. You know, most of us look at Zay Flowers as a guy that, unless there's some massive amounts of trades that the Cowboys are going to do early in the draft, which I just don't see them doing, I really feel like their first 3 picks will be exactly where they are right now, slotted. And I look at a guy like Zay Flowers, and I'm like, well, if you have any interest in him, it's at 26 because he ain't falling to you in the second round. And so seeing his name there with his size, whatever, 5'9", 5'8", that one intrigued me because I'm so used to hearing Mike McCarthy talk about, you know, having the bigger type receivers. He likes, you know, West Coast offense, having those interchangeable pieces that can play on the inside, play on the outside, that are, you know, like the Super Bowl team you had with Donald Driver and Greg Jennings and guys like that, Jordy Nelson, the bigger type of receivers like that. And so that, you know, I mean, obviously he had Randall Cobb too that they drafted. But that one probably surprised me the most. Just because of the size. I'm looking at the list right now. There's not really many other people on there. I mean, Hyatt, yes. Quentin Johnston totally makes sense. Manuel Forbes, that Steve Avila from TCU. Like most of those first round guys that are on that list, they all make sense. Zay Flowers is probably the one that stands out.
It's actually funny because you talk about size. They also have Tank Dell on there out of Houston, also a little guy. So yeah, that is interesting. Obviously not a first round guy though. Real quick before we let you go, did you have something else?
No, I was just saying there was a couple other ones that made a quick headline with the 30 visits. Drew Sanders, Arkansas linebacker, and Darnell Washington, tight end from Georgia,
big
also
boy.
One of the 30 visits as well for the Cowboys. That was on that list.
The Sanders thing's interesting to me because, you know, linebacker has kind of gotten like running back, where unless you really bring the pass rush element, which obviously was the case with Micah Parsons. That's when they drafted Micah Parsons, like from the moment they drafted him until we talked to, you know, Jerry and Steven after that first round, I kind of was shaking my head at like, I don't understand this pick that much, because if you're getting just an off the ball linebacker, I know he's a game changer, a type of linebacker that can make a lot of plays, but really at 12, like that just seems like that's kind of high for that position nowadays. But then, of course, you know, you talk to Jerry and Steven after, like, no, we liked him because of his pass rush. That didn't jump out to me at Penn State, although I knew he could do it, and I saw him wreck games like that. But that's a guy that I don't think he had more than 5 sacks in a season at Penn State. I'm thinking, hey, if you're taking this guy at 12, they probably want a double-digit sack guy, and that's what he is. But I have my doubts about them just taking a off-the-ball linebacker at 26 that's not going to bring some type of pass rush element to the game, to be a movable chess piece, you know, kind of for Dan Quinn. That's another interesting thing for me. Like when I look at this draft, if they feel that way about any position on defense, I'm completely on board, because Dan Quinn has showed you how he can utilize so many defensive players in different ways that really makes this defense so multiple. So if like a Brian Bresee, the defensive tackle from Clemson, or, you know, somebody like that falls to them and they like that person at 26, or, you know, like a Nolan Smith or one of these edge rushers that might not have fit before Dan Quinn, you got to give Dan Quinn the benefit of the doubt because of what he's shown us so far.